You ever notice how the moment things start to feel real with her, she backs off? Not all the way. Not like a slammed door. More like a slow fade. The kind that creeps in through missed texts, short replies, sudden distractions. You replay the last conversation, trying to find the exact moment it shifted. 1 minute, she was laughing like you were the center of her world. The next, you're staring at your phone, wondering if she even remembers that night. And here's what's frustrating. It doesn't make any damn sense. You didn't mess it up. You weren't clingy. You weren't cold. You were just present. You showed up like a man is supposed to. And somehow, that's when she started pulling away. It's not rejection. Not really. Rejection is clean. You know where you stand. This isn't that. This is something else. Something that messes with your sense of reality. One moment, you're holding her gaze and feeling something electric. And the next, she's looking through you like it never happened. And so, your mind goes to war with itself. You start wondering, did I say too much? Was I too available? Too honest? Should I have played it cooler? Should I have waited another hour to text her back? And then deeper questions start to bubble up. What is it about me that made her run? But maybe you're asking the wrong question. Maybe this isn't about you being too much. Maybe it's not about being too soft or too intense or too emotional. Maybe it's not about what you did at all. Because here's a thought no one teaches you growing up. Sometimes, when you're exactly what a woman has been hoping to find, that's when she runs. Not because she doesn't want it, but because she does. That's the part that throws you off, isn't it? The idea that someone could want you, really want you, and still back away from you at the same time. That someone could crave the connection, feel the chemistry, sense the possibility, and then retreat like they never felt at all. It doesn't fit the logic we've been taught. If someone wants something, they move toward it. That's what we learn as men. Hunger moves us forward. Desire drives action. But the emotional world doesn't play by those rules, especially not when it's tangled with fear, trauma, memory, and uncertainty. So maybe it's not that you scared her off. Maybe you touched something in her she hadn't felt in years, or ever, a space she's guarded for so long. She doesn't even know what it feels like to open it without flinching. And the moment she did, she panicked. Not because of you, but because of what you represent. Something real, something dangerous, something she could actually lose. And this is where most men get it wrong. They chase harder. They try to fix the sudden silence. They send a long message, explain themselves, ask what's wrong, try to get back to the version of her from a few days ago. The one who leaned in, the one who looked at them like they mattered. But what if this isn't a problem to fix? What if her pullback isn't a test for you to pass, but a mirror showing you your own relationship with uncertainty? Because when a woman pulls away right after getting close, what you're really facing isn't her withdrawal. You're facing your own impulse to close the gap, to make things feel safe again, to stabilize what was never stable to begin with. And that right there is the crack in the mask. Because now the question isn't, why is she pulling away? The question is, why can't you hold a silence without needing to fill it? Why does her distance make you feel like you're disappearing? Why does her uncertainty become your crisis? Why does your calm vanish the moment hers does? That's where Stoicism enters, not as a wall, but as a compass. Not to harden you into indifference, but to ground you in something deeper than her moods or your need for reassurance. You think this is about her? No. This is about whether you can stay centered when the ground shifts beneath your feet. This is about the strength to remain still, even as your ego begs you to move. This is about the ability to be present without demanding presence in return. And here's the final blow. Until you master that, her pullback will always feel personal, even when it's not. So the real question isn't what happened with her. The real question is, can you remain unmoved by a storm that isn't yours? That's what we're going to unravel. Not just her behavior, but your reaction to it. Not just what she's feeling, but what it awakens in you. Because once you understand that, everything changes. Let's cut deeper. The part that stings the most isn't her silence. It's the way it throws your sense of worth into question. Like suddenly, you're being measured, but you don't know by what or against who. You thought things were flowing. You were open, confident, real, And now, you're doubting yourself over a pause you didn't create. You start adjusting, overthinking, looking for patterns in her patterns. But here's what's really happening. Your mind is trying to protect you from chaos by creating a narrative. And the easiest story to believe is the one where you're the problem. But let's step back and ask something bolder. What if the problem isn't you and it's not her either? What if the real issue is how little we understand the emotional architecture of desire? We grew up on the idea that love is a reward. You do the right things, say the right words, show up as a good man. You win the prize. But real connection doesn't function like that. Real connection disorients people, especially people who aren't used to it. That's why she flinches when things get too real. It's not rejection. It's reflex. There's a concept Carl Jung talked about called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress because they don't align with the image we want to show the world. For some women, especially those who've been hurt, abandoned, or idealized love to the point of fantasy, that shadow contains vulnerability, softness, the desire to trust again. So when those feelings start surfacing, because you made them surface, it doesn't feel beautiful. It feels dangerous. And instead of leaning into that chaos, she steps back, not to punish you, but to protect the identity she's built around staying in control. Now you're stuck in limbo, wanting closeness, getting coldness. And here's the twist. You'll only make it worse if you try to solve her. Stoicism teaches a brutal but liberating truth. Some things are outside your control. You don't control her fears. You don't control her tempo. You don't control her healing process or whether she even wants to heal. The only thing you control, the only thing, is how you choose to respond when your desire is met with distance. But let's not pretend that's easy. When she pulls away, it triggers something primal in you, a fear of abandonment, a fear of not being enough, a fear that no matter how calm you act on the surface, there's a storm inside begging for validation. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Your mind will fill in the gaps she leaves behind, and it'll rarely do so with compassion. That silence, your brain will interpret it as rejection, indifference, betrayal. And unless you've developed the discipline to see your thoughts without becoming them, you'll act on that fear. You'll chase, over-explain, collapse. But Stoicism demands something else. It demands you sit with discomfort without moving, that you resist the urge to define yourself by how others treat you, that you hold your frame not as an act of control, but as an act of respect, not just for her, for yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't rush to fix what's unclear. It just stays, present, steady, undisturbed. Now let's look at the other side of the coin, her pullback. It's not random. It's not always manipulative. It often comes from an emotional paradox. The closer she feels, the more afraid she becomes of being truly seen. Because to be seen is to be exposed. And to be exposed is to risk everything. Think about it from her lens. Maybe she's been the one left on read before. Maybe she was vulnerable once, and the person she trusted used that softness against her. Maybe love, in her experience, doesn't mean safety. It means surrender. And surrender, to her, equals pain. So when she starts feeling something real with you, something unexpected happens. Her survival system kicks in. It doesn't care that you're solid, calm, present. It doesn't know that you're not like the others. It only knows this feeling is too much, too fast, too dangerous. And she recoils. It's not logical. Trauma never is. But it's real. The key is, don't make a reaction your reality. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." You need a why strong enough to hold you through the emotional uncertainty. A sense of self that doesn't dissolve when someone else shifts their energy. Because the moment you start orbiting her emotional state, you've lost your own. And ironically, that's when she loses trust. Not because you're bad, but because she no longer feels your ground beneath her. She may not say it out loud, but this is what she's scanning for. Are you calm when I'm not? Are you centered when I'm spinning? Can I lean toward you without you collapsing under the weight of my confusion? If the answer is yes, she'll feel it. If it's no, she'll vanish. So here's the truth. You're not being punished. You're being measured, not by her logic, but by her nervous system. And how you respond to that, how you hold your line when a map disappears, is what separates a man who's emotionally dependent from a man who's emotionally sovereign. The pullback isn't the problem. The problem is thinking you need to fix it. The fix is in your stillness. Here's the part no one tells you. When a woman pulls away and you start to doubt yourself, not just casually, but deeply, something dangerous begins to shift inside, quietly, invisibly, and unless you're brutally honest with yourself, you won't even see it happening. You don't just question her interest. You start to question your value. Not openly. You don't walk around telling your friends you feel inadequate. No, you just start adjusting. Subtly, slowly. You hold back next time. You delay your reply to seem less available. You make sure not to come off too interested, because you don't want to scare her off again. You learn to perform cool, to project chill, but inside, you're restless, anxious, constantly measuring your own behavior against her silence. And you call it strategy. You think you're being smart, playing the game, keeping your edge. But really, what you're doing is disconnecting from your essence. And here's the Stoic truth. Anything you have to fake to keep, you're already losing. Because when your behavior is shaped by someone else's emotional volatility, you're no longer free. You're reactive. You're orbiting her moods, her silences, her fears. You've made her the sun, and now your world moves around hers. That's not connection. That's slavery. You want to know how this dynamic wrecks men over time? It's not the heartbreak. It's not even the ghosting. It's the way it conditions you to abandon yourself, piece by piece, for the illusion of staying desirable. It's psychological corrosion. And the worst part? It looks like maturity on the surface. You tell yourself you're adapting, being more mindful, more in control. But really, you're building a prison out of second guessing, out of unspoken fear, out of trying to be what she might like instead of who you truly are. And every time you abandon your center for approval, you chip away at your masculine core. This is where the Stoics offer a brutal mirror. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Translation: the moment your identity hinges on how a woman feels about you, you are no longer free. You are owned. By what? Not by her, but by your fear of losing her. And that fear will quietly dictate everything. What you say, what you don't say, how you move, how much you reveal, until one day you've edited yourself so much she's no longer with you. She's with a projection, a diluted, filtered version of who you thought would be safe enough to keep her close. And ironically, that's the moment she loses interest, because women don't fall for perfection. They fall for presence, groundedness, that rare energy of a man who doesn't flinch when things get uncertain, a man who doesn't bend just to be kept. But when she senses that your peace is negotiable, when she realizes her withdrawal has the power to make you spiral, something shifts in her, not always consciously, but viscerally. You become less magnetic, less solid, less trustworthy, not because you're bad, but because you're too movable. Remember this. What she pulls away from is rarely your presence. It's your reaction to her unpredictability. If you can't hold your own when she gets cold, how will you hold her when life gets cruel? And this is where most men miss the real cost. They think they're just dealing with another girl who's hard to read. But what's really happening is a slow erosion of their emotional strength, their ability to stand still when nothing feels certain, their grip on reality. You start craving closure, answers. You tell yourself, if she'd just explain what's wrong, I'd be fine. But you wouldn't, because what you're chasing isn't clarity. It's control. You want to feel okay again, and you've outsourced that okayness to someone who's clearly not in a place to give it to you. And now your inner calm is held hostage by her mood swings. That's the real tragedy. Not that she left, but that you followed her emotionally every step of the way. You became unstable in the name of caring. You lost yourself trying to hold on to someone else. That's not stoicism. That's self-abandonment. And here's where the philosophical rubber meets the road. Apatheia, the Stoic state of serene calm, doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you're not ruled by what you feel. It means you don't collapse every time someone else shifts their emotional weather. You remain grounded in what's real and what's yours. Your values, your energy, your direction. But when your self-worth starts hitching a ride on someone else's validation, even subtly, you are no longer sovereign. And a man who loses sovereignty, even for a woman he deeply wants, will never hold her respect. Because on a primal level, what creates safety in her nervous system is knowing. This man doesn't need me to feel okay. He wants me. He may even desire me deeply. But he does not need me to stabilize his identity. And that energy, that's what makes you unforgettable. Not need, not effort, not flowers or long texts or clever words, but your ability to stand in silence with your spine straight, to feel the sting of withdrawal and not let it redefine your worth, to witness her confusion without making it your own. That's what she's actually watching. And in a world full of men who chase at the first sign of distance, the one who stays centered becomes a rare gravity. So ask yourself, can you hold your frame when she unravels? Can you maintain clarity when the signals go dark? Can you love without losing yourself? Because if you can't, the cost won't just be her. The cost will be you. And no woman, not even the most beautiful, most intoxicating, most soul-shaking woman, is worth the price of forgetting who you are. So what now? What do you do when you realize you've been leaking your power drip by drip, through every overanalysis, every emotional chase, every silent hope that she'll come around if you just stay patient, just stay understanding? You break the pattern. And not in some dramatic, theatrical way where you declare, I'm done with her, and post a motivational quote on your story to prove it. No, the rebellion begins quietly, internally, in the most stoic way possible, by reclaiming your inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius called it the fortress within, a place no insult, no ghosting, no mood swing could ever touch. It doesn't mean you cut her off. It doesn't mean you punish her. It means you stop negotiating with chaos. You stop giving your attention to uncertainty like it deserves your time just because it triggers your wounds. It means you sit with the discomfort of not being chosen and realize you still choose yourself. This is where most men flinch. They want tactics. They want steps. They want, what do I text her when she pulls away? But this isn't about what you say. It's about what you embody. A woman doesn't test you with words. She tests your nervous system. She feels what shakes you. She senses what unrounds you. And most of all, she notices what you sacrifice in your pursuit of being enough for her. So how do you rebel? First, you withdraw your emotional investment from outcomes you don't control. You stop refreshing her profile. You stop tracking how long it's been since you last replied. You stop trying to decode her silences like they hold the key to your peace. You take back the energy you've been outsourcing. This is apatheia, not indifference, but calm detachment from what doesn't belong to you. You cannot control her triggers. You cannot control her healing timeline. You cannot control whether she's ready for someone like you. And here's the most freeing part. You don't need to. The moment you stop waiting for her clarity to gain your own, everything changes. You realize the battlefield was never outside. It was always in you. Second, you shift your posture, literally and energetically. You stop sitting around wondering what went wrong. You get up, move, lift, walk, create, build. You re-enter your body. Why? Because overthinking is a symptom of disembodiment, of being stuck in your head trying to solve a puzzle that isn't yours. You want to reconnect to your power? Reconnect to your presence. Nietzsche said, the body is a great reason, a multiplicity with one sense, a war and a peace, a herd and a shepherd. When your mind spirals, your body anchors you. When your emotions fluctuate, your actions recenter you. When she withdraws, your discipline keeps you from chasing ghosts. Third, you practice radical self-respect. Not arrogance, not fake indifference. Respect. You don't text just to get a reaction. You don't chase closure like it's owed to you. You don't audition for a place in her life she's not actively offering. Because here's the truth. Every time you reach out from a place of emotional lack, she doesn't feel your love. She feels your fear, and fear repels. But when you act from fullness, even in silence, she feels that too. It changes the frequency, because now you're not reacting, you're choosing. From strength, from clarity, from presence. That's the core of Stoicism. Not emotionless stillness, but purposeful movement. You don't act out of impulse. You act out of principle. If your principle is, I do not betray myself for connection, then you stop betraying yourself. Even when it hurts. Even when you miss her. Even when your body aches to hear from her again. You stay with yourself. This is a rebellion. Not against her, but against a part of you that keeps abandoning your inner authority every time love feels unstable. And you'll feel the pull to return to the old pattern, to check in, to ask if she's okay, to be nice, to prove you're not like the others. Don't. Let her feel your absence, not as punishment, but as a statement of truth. I do not beg to be understood. I do not chase where I am not met. I do not dilute my presence for someone who doesn't recognize it. Let her feel the weight of what she's losing, not through anger or guilt, but through the undeniable solidity of your detachment. That's what Stoic magnetism looks like. Not coldness, stillness, not silence as a weapon, silence as sovereignty. And the men who embody this, they stop bleeding energy. They stop chasing moods. They stop attaching their masculinity to emotional breadcrumbs. They become unshakable. And women feel it, even if they don't understand it. Especially if they don't understand it. Because now, you're not part of the pattern. You're the pattern interrupt. You're the one she can't predict. The one who didn't fold when she pulled back. The one who didn't beg when things got foggy. The one who, instead of asking, what should I do, asked a better question. Who am I when no one is watching? And when that answer becomes, I am calm, I am clear, I am grounded, you'll find that you no longer need her to validate your worth. You are enough, not because she came back, but because you never left yourself. There comes a point, if you're honest with yourself, when you stop wanting her back, not out of bitterness, not because you've hardened, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed her in the first place. And it's not that she was wrong or evil or manipulative. She wasn't. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe she was fighting ghosts you'll never meet. But at some point, it stops being about her and starts becoming about you. About what you were willing to tolerate just to feel loved. About how many times you confuse silence or mystery, avoidance for depth, distance for complexity. And this is a final truth. You weren't chasing her. You were chasing a version of yourself that felt worthy in her eyes. That's what makes it hard to let go. Not the girl, the story, the identity you built around finally being enough because she saw you, the way her attention stitched up parts of you that never felt accepted. And the moment she pulled away, it wasn't just her absence you felt. It was a collapse of that illusion. And that collapse is sacred. It's the very thing the Stoics prepared us for, because they weren't writing to make men calm. They were writing to make men real, to teach us how to live in a world where people leave, where desires aren't always mutual, where uncertainty is constant, and where the only thing you can ever own, truly own, is your response. This is why Marcus Aurelius could write, "Do not waste time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Because there's a kind of peace that doesn't depend on being understood. There's a kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen. And there's a kind of love for yourself that doesn't need a mirror to prove it's real. That's what you were always searching for in her. A mirror, one that reflected back your worth. One that made your presence feel meaningful. One that made your heart feel like it wasn't too much. But here's the shift. You become the mirror. You become the one who validates your depth, not because she calls it valuable, but because you live it. You become the one who honors your presence, not because someone chooses to stay, but because you know what you bring when you show up. You stop playing to be chosen and start choosing yourself in full, not the curated version, not the one that's easy to love, but the whole thing. The fire, the fear, the softness, the silence, all of it. That's when you stop attracting confusion. because now you're no longer tolerating it in yourself. You're not seduced by ambiguity. You don't chase what runs. You don't romanticize what wounds. You recognize emotional chaos for what it is, a reflection of someone still battling themselves. And you don't step into that ring anymore, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. You care about your peace. You care about your time. You care about the kind of man you're becoming. And maybe, in that clarity, she comes back. Maybe not, but by then it won't matter. Because the man who walks in his purpose doesn't need permission to keep walking. The man who has reclaimed his center doesn't trade it for temporary affection. He doesn't shrink to prove he's safe. He doesn't perform to stay interesting. He doesn't bend to be loved. He stands, unapologetically, because he's done negotiating his truth for proximity. That's the kind of man who turns silence into strength, distance into direction, pain into power, not by becoming colder, but by becoming cleaner, clearer, rooted. And in that clarity, everything changes. You don't just want connection, you filter for it. You don't just hope to be chosen. You recognize who chooses you back in full. You stop being seduced by the intensity of emotional pullbacks and start respecting the energy that remains when the drama disappears. And that's where the deepest Stoic lesson lands. To love without attachment, to care without control, to give without losing yourself. Because when you can do that, when you can hold someone close without needing to grip them, you no longer fear their distance. You've already chosen where you stand. And that position, that calm inner ground, becomes unshakable. Not because nothing shakes you, but because you know who you are even when the shaking starts. And that's what makes you rare. Not the beard, not the car, not the words, not the confidence you pretend to have, but the truth you refuse to abandon when no one is watching. So let her come, let her go, let her choose, let her retreat. And you remain, because she was never the test. You were, and you passed the moment you stopped looking to her for the answer. The moment you chose silence over reaction, stillness over strategy, dignity over desperation. The moment you stayed with yourself, even when everything in you wanted to chase. Because that's not weakness. That's freedom. And that freedom is the one thing she'll never forget. Not because you forced her to remember, but because you became unforgettable.